Good evening, everyone. Tonight I'm gonna play a little bit of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, for the Mega Drive. And this is one of those games that benefits immensely from being played with the second player. This game is fun, but it's a lot more fun if you play with somebody else, like with the second player. Ideally with other people in the room, so you can kind of comment on it and make fun of it. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up in the style of Streets of Rage or Double Dragon. And the whole Power Rangers thing, I talked a little bit about it on my VR Troopers playthrough. The Power Rangers was a series created by Haim Saban, in which he used Japanese stock footage of a Super Sentai series and created a sort of localized version of it for the audiences in the United States. So the Power Rangers were these teenagers that lived in a fictional place called Angel Grove or whatever. I watched the show when I was, let's see, Power Rangers came out in 95. I think it was 95. I was probably, let's see, yeah, I was 13, 12, 13 when they came out. And I watched the show, but I watched it because it was so ridiculously corny that I just could not help but to watch it. There's some good advice right there. Do your fighting on the screen, not at home or at school. If a lot of people follow that advice, I think we'd have a better society. Okay, let's start a new game. One player. 6,000 years ago, a morphological being known as Ivan Ooze ruled the world and reigned of unparalleled terror. He rid entire planets of their adult population and brainwashed the young to follow his evil path. I gotta admit, that's actually kind of ingenious. If you want to dominate a population, you have to dominate the younger individuals because children are most malleable. Maybe I'm reading too deep into this. Anyway, the evil Ivan Ooze is causing trouble and you're supposed to beat the hell out of him. Whatever, stage 1. Okay, let's see who I pick. I think I'll go with the Black Ranger. Yeah. There we go. Now, this game is a pretty simple game. You have basically 3 buttons. One of them does this grab attack, the other one jumps, and there's one button for a sort of spin kick. So, very simple. It's one of those pick up and play games that pretty much anybody can pick up and enjoy, regardless of their skill level. And there's a special attack that you can do if you hold the attack button for a few seconds and you charge up your weapon. So all in all, it's a pretty standard package, but it's a very solid package as well. So you definitely won't get lost with it. You know exactly what to expect. funny thing about the Black Ranger is that his weapon is an axe, but it doubles as a gun. Which, wouldn't that be useful if you were a lumberjack and suddenly you get attacked by a grizzly bear in the woods? This game is so great to play with other people in the room and in the living room, just making fun of it and of the overall cheesiness. That's one thing I do miss about the 16-bit generation. If you wanted to play with somebody, you actually had to invite them over to play. That's one thing I also like about the Wii, Nintendo Wii, is that it's such a great machine to get people together and generally just have fun in the same room. You know, it's one of those funny moments in history of video games because we're in a transitional period. Right now the PlayStation 3, Nintendo Wii generation is coming to an end. And I think last month, it was last month, if I'm not mistaken, the last official release for the Nintendo Wii was, pardon the redundancy, released, and it was Pandora's Tower. And Pandora's Tower is kind of like is to the Nintendo Wii what the game Magic Knight Rayearth was for the Sega Saturn. The last officially released game, and I see it becoming very expensive in the future because not that many copies of Pandora's Tower were made for the Western audiences. I happened to pick up my copy of it right at launch, and I have to say, I'm pretty speechless. Yeah, I'm going to miss the Nintendo Wii very much. It's such a great system, and it's the system I played the most this generation, and the system I collected the most for as well. And in a way, the Nintendo Wii reminds me of the Sega Saturn, in that it is an excellent system for 3D games, but its main strength I find is 2D games, like 2D platformers and 2D shooters like Contra and Gradius, and 2D action games like Castlevania. I think that's the main strength of the system. It has an amazing capacity for creating 2D scenarios, much like the Saturn did. And it just has a very exotic library. Most recently I've been playing Pandora's Tower on Nintendo Wii. And boy, let me tell you, Pandora's Tower is one of the most creative, visually appealing games I've ever seen in recent years. It's easily one of my favorite games on Wii, instantly. And I remember when the game was announced that it was going to be localized. I saw a trailer for it, and it was amazing. And in the comment section for the trailer, there was this 11-year-old kid, and I don't remember the exact quote, but the gist of his comment was, "Developers don't learn, do they? Only games that sell on the Wii are Nintendo games. This will flop like every other JRPG. Japan continues to ignore HD consoles. This franchise is dead." To which another commenter responded, "You do know this is a first-party game, right?" And I would bet my left testicle that this kid does not know that. I mean, just the whole sentence, because there are absolutely no punctuation marks in this block of just uninterrupted text. This kid has obviously no grasp on reality, and he's just repeating what countless people just repeat because other countless people repeat. He has no critical thinking of his own, like most kids at that age. I mean, his whole comment about Japan not paying attention to HD consoles. First of all, there's no such thing as an HD console. People don't know what HD means. High definition simply means a high scan line count. Now, high definition can be anything between 480 progressive scan all the way up to the brand new 4000 4K whatever resolution that Sony came up with. Which incidentally no film or no media actually supports as of today, but that's a whole nother hill of beans. And supposing that we want to get down to it, what is a high definition console? It's a console that outputs in high definition. Okay, so every console from 1998 onwards is a high definition console, because the Sega Dreamcast was capable of outputting in VGA on 480 progressive scan. And those of you who have a VGA box for the Dreamcast know that it looks amazing. The image is crisp and clear, not a single little alteration whatsoever. And every system from there on could output in high definition. So basically this kid has no ground to stand on, no argument whatsoever. Now, if you're 11 years old, or even if you're 15 years old, I might cut you some slack and I might not go too hard on you because you're a kid, and kids at that age, for the most part, with very few exceptions, don't really have critical thinking, and all they can do is repeat what their peers and what other people say. They don't have much of a capacity to analyze things on their own. They're just not smart enough. The real, let's say, worrying thing is when you're 35 years old or thereabout, and you're still saying stupid things like that, and basically just making an idiot of yourself. Maybe I would accept that if you're 15 or 11 or something, but a grown man with absolutely no critical skill, with no sense of intellect, who falls victim to marketing and to an opinion that is coming from reviewers and internet personalities that get paid to say such things. If you have absolutely no capacity to think for yourself, I'm sorry, I really can't respect you very much. You get no respect from me. It's just astounding how people don't think anymore, and I don't know if there's ever been like a time in which... The thing is that nowadays, with the internet and all that, information is more readily available than ever in any other period in human history. But there are more uninformed people than ever, which is just amazingly... It boggles my mind, so to say. People who have no sense of intelligence and no capacity to think for themselves and just repeat what everybody else thinks and says. They don't even analyze it as wrong or right. They just repeat what everybody else says, and that becomes their opinion. If you're like tofu, and if you taste exactly what whatever is beside you tastes like, I'm sorry, you get no respect from me at all. That kind of people they really piss me off. And the sad thing is that it's a vast majority of people who have no capacity to think for themselves. They just want to fit in with the in crowd and be hype, with the others. And a large part of that mentality actually has a lot to do with Sony Computer Entertainment. Sony is to blame for a lot of that mentality because if you'll remember, when they were having their E3 presentations around 2003, 2004, when the PlayStation 2 was their main platform, they were coming to the E3 presentations with their enormous ego, and they were going like, oh yes, we sold this many units and this is our sales chart, and they made it seem like they were more worthy than the others because they sold a lot of units. And that is the stupidest thing that I can think of. Because now people will be like, oh, I enjoy this system because it sells more than the other, and it's just an idiotic way of thinking. Unless you own stock in a company, that's the only reason I can find if you that you can actually care if something sells more than something else because you're making money off of it. If you don't own stock in the company, that is probably the stupidest excuse for enjoying something. Just means that you want to fit in with the in crowd, and basically you have a very low self-esteem. And I think Sony at the moment are kind of eating their words and regretting themselves because right now they're not in a very good economic position. I don't know if they're gonna get past this 8th generation, but I suppose we'll have to wait and see. Yeah, this is one of those games that, unless you have somebody with you in the room to play with, you can get pretty monotonous. Until like the 3rd level. The 3rd level is when they start to change things up a bit. They give you a Zord, which is the name for one of those big robot thingies. And you actually get to ride in this giant robot thing. And they change up the enemy ride a little bit too. Yeah, this is one of those games that's really fondly remembered, especially if you played it when you were little, when you were a kid. Now, this is one of those games that I played with my classmate at my classmate's house because I didn't have this. And I usually saw it at the store for very cheap, but I could never buy it. Or maybe I had the option to buy it, but there was another game that was more attractive because I had already played so much of this game. Like, instead of buying this game, I remember one occasion I bought Shining Force for the Mega Drive, which of course was a better purchase in the long run because I had played this game so much with my classmate that I knew it inside out. However, Shining Force was something completely new. I had to plan my purchases very carefully back then because I had no financial, let's say, financial aid in what came to video games. I had to buy games myself, which is probably maybe one of the reasons why I appreciate games even more than like most people is because I had to buy all of them myself. I didn't have parents who would buy me a video game. My parents would never buy me a game. My parents put food on the table, put clothes on my back, and paid for my education, and that was pretty much it. I'm not gonna buy me a video game. So I had to provide for myself. I started working when I was 13, teaching English, and I slowly saved up to buy every video game that I own, which is, in the long run, helps you appreciate them all the more, I suppose. Okay, let's choose the Falcon Zord, which is this. Now, this enemy's name is Hornitron, which, okay, I think I don't have to say any more than that. And the next enemy of this tag team is Scorpitron, which is terribly creative, if I do say so myself. Now, say what you want about old games, but I insist that old games just hold up better. And it's that simplicity and that pick up and play sort of characteristic that makes old games ideal for collecting. And it's difficult to explain, but it's generally more satisfying. It just feels, in one way or another, more fun and satisfying to buy and play an old game like on Saturn or on the Mega Drive than it does to buy a new game on one of these newer systems. I find it comparable to preparing a spaghetti dinner at home with your own ground beef and tomatoes and whatnot versus buying a Chef Boyardee spaghetti dinner. You know, you get the meaning. The homemade dinner just feels more satisfying and more well made than the industrial mass-produced Chef Boyardee spaghetti dinner. And it's kind of the same case with Saturn games and Mega Drive games versus like these brand new games on PlayStation 3 or PC or whatnot. Of course there are exceptions, but for the most part, newer games just feel like products. Really going to miss this current generation very much. I think mostly because this is the last generation in which video game systems are precisely that. Video game systems. They don't try to be anything else. And specifically the Nintendo Wii, you buy it to play games, nothing else. Same reason you buy a Mega Drive or you buy a Super Nintendo or you buy a Saturn or a Nintendo 64. You buy it because you want to play games. This new trend is that they want to make a machine that is, let's say, a multi-purpose machine that happens to be able to play video games. Like this new Xbox One thing. Now, I happened to watch the conference of the Xbox One presentation. I didn't watch it live because I was working at the moment. But I watched it afterwards, and it just seems to me like they completely lost their focus. They have no confidence in their video game division, so they want to make a machine that will basically be a set-top box or a cable box, which also happens to play video games. In that regard, it's kind of like the Philips CDI, in that the Philips CDI was actually this multi-purpose machine that also happened to double as a video game system. And it was as big as a paving slab, as big as an office block. Which, ironically, this new Xbox One, it looks to be about the same size as a Philips CDI, and I'm pretty sure it weighs just as much. When you buy a Sega or you buy a Nintendo or an Atari, what are you buying it for? You're buying it to play games. Because these companies are game making companies, they don't do anything else. Sega started in the 1950s as an arcade game manufacturer for air bases overseas. Nintendo started in the late 19th century as a Hanafuda card maker, and Atari started in the late 70s, I believe, as an arcade manufacturer. So they have their focus well focused, pardon the redundance. They are game makers, and you buy the machine because you want to play games. Now with Microsoft and with Sony, unfortunately, they have a completely different focus. Sony and Microsoft, as console manufacturers, their systems have an identity crisis. They want to be a bit of everything, but really, the only thing that people are really interested in is playing games on them. I know very few people who actually bought their Xbox or their PlayStation 3 to watch movies. I mean, that's what the DVD player is for, or the Blu-ray player if you happen to have one. Or the cable box. You already have those devices, chances are. So, what's the point of buying one of these systems if they're not going to have any content game-wise that you'll be interested in? The only positive thing that I can take of this conference is that the price of the Xbox 360 is going to go down, as well as the software prices. So now's the time to get into one if you haven't gotten into one. So, bottom line, naturally I'm not going to buy an Xbox One. It just does not serve its purpose well, and it's not a very good investment considering that you have to be connected to the internet all the time. And when that thing stops supporting the internet, like the original Xbox and soon the successor will also stop supporting its internet connection, well, it's pretty much a paving slab. You can use it to replace a broken tile in your bathroom or something, but it's not going to serve its purpose anymore. I honestly think that they're going to lose a lot of clientele with this new Xbox One. I think they're going in the wrong direction, and they're going to regret it in the long run. But the fire has already been lit, so all you can do is wait for it to burn itself out. And speaking of burnt out, so am I. I think I'm gonna call it a night. Alright, ladies and gents, that'll be all for tonight. Thank you for joining me.